Well, I've entitled our lesson today, Postcards from Paris and the Spiritual Law of Increase. And because it is a quick fix lesson, some of the stories may sound familiar to you, but that's okay. We can never hear them too much. I know when you buy the CD and listen to it 30 times throughout the month, it's okay to hear some of the stories more than once. Anyway, I want to start by saying I grew up the daughter of an immigrant factory worker father. My dad was born in Belgium. He immigrated when he was 11 years old, and he became a maintenance man at the Campbell's Soup Factory down on Franklin Road, I think it was. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And our house was loving and wonderful. I had one of those remarkably fabulous childhoods, but it wasn't necessarily affluent, And there were times when my dad, when I was in my teens, my dad got cancer and couldn't work for 2 years, and my mom didn't have a job outside the house, and so I really saw our family struggle. And even though I was younger, it would have been easy to let a consciousness of lack imprint in me. It would have been easy to let struggle and fear of not enough or lower socioeconomic level or blue-collar worker or whatever. It would have been easy to let those things imprint in me. Then also, the one thing, the good or bad, that happened is we lived across the tracks in the immigrant neighborhood, but I was bused to school. And I was bused to a school where all of my classmates, or most of my classmates, were a lot wealthier than my family. And so in high school, the girls all had the latest convertible sports car. They wore beautifully expensive prom dresses. And I could tell there was a great disparity between my life and affordability and theirs. And again, it would have been easy to let that imprint on me. There were times when I felt that keen difference, and I worried about, would I make it in the world, and would I ever be able to live at that level, and how would my future go? And then blessings be all that they are by divine appointment. My mom and I were introduced to a unity church, and the unity principles, equip us. You know this. I'm preaching to the choir here. The unity principles equip us with all that we need for our eternal ongoing, not just, this lifetime, but for all of our soul's potential and growth. And so I was blessed to not have that early on experience stick in my consciousness, or I was able to use the principles to transcend it and have a really remarkable life. And it gets better all the time, right? We're never, Dorothy Pearson used to say, you never arrive. That's the silliest thing in the world. We're always evolving and growing. So I did think, though, it would be fun this morning to just remind ourselves to have a real faith builder by reminding ourselves or giving you an example of a practical demonstration of the spiritual principles of prosperity and how they work. The spiritual law of increase, as I said. And I've shared with you before the story of Tanya. Tanya was a young woman, American-born, but when she was 7, her mom divorced and they moved to Costa Rica. And so she grew up in Costa Rica, but when she was 19, she came to work for me as an intern for the summer in order to establish herself in Kansas City, to get into college and to start her life. And one of my friends sponsored her and paid her $500 a month to work for me in the afternoons, and of course, and then asked if she could live with me. So okay, so she can live with me. And when she arrived, she had 2 suitcases and her bicycle off the plane, and that was the sum total of her worldly possessions as she was starting this new life. But in less than 90 days, Tanya had a fully paid-for car, a 4-year scholarship to UMKC, University, Kansas, Missouri. She had a job, a place to live, an apartment near the campus, because I was 13 miles from the campus, and most importantly, a cell phone. A cell phone. Now, how did she manifest such a demonstration in such a short period of time? And today I want to give you 3 key concepts in the spiritual principle of increase that you can use to make a practical demonstration in your life with these principles. It will give you the ability to expand and enrich any area of your life, whether it's your health, your relationships, the love in your life, your career, whatever it is. These principles you apply to any area of your life. And today I want to talk about them, especially to show you how you can use them to build an inner awareness so you can cause the desire that you feel that, God speaks to us in ideas. So you want to, how do you get that idea that drops into your mind, how do you get it to cross over from the invisible spiritual realm of spirit into the visible physical realm of life? How do you get that to leap through and cross over? And I'm going to give you 3 key concepts to help you move the invisible realm of substance into the visible realm of supply. I seem to be really good at that. I mean, money falls on me from out of the sky, which is great, but in all process, it works for anything. And if you're willing to do the inner work that's necessary, these are 3 of the most important concepts that you can take hold of in truth principles. They're vitally powerful. So let's talk about them. Let's see, what do I have here? Very simply, the spiritual principle of increase can secure a continual flow of good in your life. And I named the 3 concepts in an easy to remember way. They are prepare, prime, and pour. And I'll say more about those in a few minutes, but it's prepare, prime, and pour. The spiritual reference for our study today comes from the story of Elisha with the widow's oil. And I'll remind us of the story. You remember the widow had a husband who died. She was deeply in debt. The government was going to take her sons and enslave them in order to pay for the debt. She was feeling really desperate when she met Elisha. And it was interesting, Elijah asked her an interesting question, didn't he? You remember? He said, well, what do you have in your house? And she said, well, all I have left, I only have a little oil. And he said, well, go out and gather all the vessels and containers that you can and bring them in and go into your own room and shut the door and begin to pour that little bit of oil into those containers. And so she did that. She gathered all the vessels she could find. She went into the inner chamber, the room, shut the door, began to pour, and the oil poured out, and it continued to pour until it filled all of the vessels, until there weren't any more vessels to fill. The oil multiplied, expanded, increased, because this is the spiritual law of increase. It increased until all the vessels were filled. She took the vessels, sold the oil, her sons went free, and she lived happily ever after. I don't think that line's in Scripture, but... So in the story, metaphysically, the woman, anytime there's a woman in Scripture, we all know that's our emotional nature, right? It's not just, it's our feeling nature, and we all have a feeling nature. And she's widowed, meaning she's feeling empty and desperate and distraught and unsupported. There's no visible means of support for her in the universe. So she's feeling emotionally drained and deeply distraught. Elisha, of course, represents the Christ spirit within us. And the house that he talks about when he says, what do you have in your house, is your consciousness. What do you have in your inner awareness that you can work with? What do you have that you can use to activate a flow of increase? What do you have in the inner awareness of your mind that you can use to help midwife across your invisible dream or desire into physical reality? What do you have that you can use? Because whatever it is, he tells you go out and gather all the containers and vessels that you can, and then begin to pour that mind essence into your life. Begin to pour that mind essence into your life until you start a flow, until spirit begins to pour into you. It says the widow closed the door and she poured the oil, and she poured and she kept pouring until there was visible supply that began to fill the vessels. So you want to pour that ideal of that Christ ideal that matches your desire. You want to pour that out of yourself, and then again, like we said in our meditation, create that V at the top of yourself and allow the Spirit of God to pour that same essence through you. So you almost create a stream that's like a greased slide that your desire can just slip right out of the invisible into the visible of your life. And you keep pouring it until you see results. In the book, The Essential Fillmore, that we have here, we're out of, but we're getting some more. This one by James Gaither, who was one of my instructors in ministerial school. This is, I think I had this in the announcements. I had a better idea of it. Wait a minute. His workshop is Unity, a Practical Spiritual Path. This workshop provides an overview of the practical, mystical metaphysics of Charles Fillmore based on this book. So he's taken a summary of Mr. Fillmore's teachings and gives us the practical and metaphysical interpretation of them. I was reading that recently in my prayer time, and I went, wow, I must have really evolved because I get this now. Charles Fillmore is not easy to read. And I just opened it up. I thought, I understand. I can comprehend this now. And then I realized I was reading Jim's notes. Oh, gosh, darn. But he has all these notes in the beginning of the chapters that he's excerpted that describes what Charles Fillmore is trying to say. So Mr. Fillmore says, there is a kingdom of abundance of all things, and it may be found by those who seek it and are willing to comply with its laws. Prosperity is not a matter of earnings or assets, but a condition brought about by certain ideas that have been allowed to rule in consciousness. What do you have in your house? Certain ideas that have been allowed to rule in consciousness. It would have been easy for lack and not a fear of not enough to imprint on me based on the childhood I grew up in. If you grew up with a single mother, it would be easy for you to say, oh, I grew up with the household of a single mother and we never really had or she struggled, or, whatever. So there is a kingdom of abundance of all things, and it may be found by those who seek it and are willing to comply with its laws. Prosperity is not a matter of earnings or assets, but a condition brought about by certain ideas that have been allowed to rule in consciousness. The widow was in a consciousness of lack and desperation and destitution. And Elisha said, take whatever, however small and insignificant it may seem, you have something within you because you have the Christ Spirit within you. And you can raise that up and offer that and use that. Prosperity is not a matter of asking God for more, but conditioning our mind through prayer to receive and to accept and to allow more of God's universal good to flow through us. In essence, to get unblocked and allow all that's there for us all the time to flow through us in bigger and more and larger and more profound ways. And again, whether that's love or health or life, whatever it is. So, key concepts: prepare, prime, and pour. Number one, prepare. That is, create expectancy. Let yourself hope again and believe in your dreams. We get to this age and we kind of go, life's kind of, we get real. We get, we know how it really is. And there's a lot of weariness on us. It's okay to let yourself have hope and expectancy that your life is good and that things are only getting better nationwide. Worldwide, things are getting better. Love is the only power. Love is the only way. So let yourself feel. If you're not demonstrating prosperity in your life, it's not because it's not available to you. It's not because it's not the truth of who you are. It's not because of a lack of supply. It's because you are not in touch as fully as you could be with the reality that there is one presence and one power active in your life, God the good. That's it. So how do we get more in touch with that, you see? How do we get more in touch with that? There's a world within you, a world of thought and feeling and power and light and beauty, and although it's invisible to you, its forces are real. Its forces are real. And how do we get in touch with that? Key concept number 2, we prime the pump. You all know about priming a pump, right? You pour water down it and then more water comes out. Something like that's the Cliff Note version. You use what you have in your house. You use what you have in your consciousness because you are never without the Spirit of God within you. You use what you have at hand to activate flow. Now you may say, I don't have anything to give, or I have enough, but I'm afraid of losing it. You know, you can't just, I've got to measure that out, so I make sure I have enough to last my lifetime. I don't want to outlive my investments, kind of thing. But I'm not talking about anything outside of you. I'm talking about what you have within you, which is your faith and your wisdom and your strength and your power and your love. You have all of that to give and all of that to use to jumpstart a flow of increase in your life. And you can pick any one. It's the one that you feel most deeply in you, that's inherently in you. Maybe you're really intuitive. Maybe you're really strong. Maybe you have a lot of courage. But you use that one. And then the third key concept is you pour it into your life. You center yourself, you shut out all the distractions, and you spend a few minutes pouring your faith or your love or your wisdom into your life. Mr. Fillmore says again, consciously calling on the intelligence of God moves into action the power that draws spiritual substance into visible supply. When you close that door and you align with the truth of who you are, you align with a spiritual ideal, you are activating spiritual substance and you are opening the way for it to cross over for you. If you want healing for your body, you take the idea of divine life, the idea of divine health, and you sit with that. You shut yourself away and you forget about anything except the outcome, which is perfect health and wholeness and fitness for your body at the perfect weight with plenty of energy and all the stuff. You sit with that divine idea of life and you pour that out of yourself until Spirit somehow, it gets unblocked and Spirit matches it and pours all that life and health through you. You create that portal so that your desires cross over from the invisible realm of Spirit into the physical reality of your life. Anytime, any condition, anything that you want to create. Do you believe it? You see, that's where we get all caught up in that stuff. Well, remember Tanya? Here's how the spiritual increase worked for her. She arrived, as I said, with 2 suitcases and a bicycle, because that was how she was going to get around, aside from using my car. And in less than 90 days, she had it all. So how did she do that? How did she manifest such a demonstration? Well, she used the 3 concepts. And she was a unity baby, so she knew prayer and affirmation and all of that. But what Tanya had was this enthusiastic, joy-filled essence. She had a list of dreams. She had things to do. She had hope and certainty and expectation, and she was just vibrating joy. And she's a very loving, loving young woman. But she had expectancy about the possibilities for her life, and she had a lot of joy. Joy was the spiritual ideal that she was holding on to. It was joy. Second thing she did was prime the pump. She thought about what she could give, and what she could give is kind of interesting and surprising. She had the ability to speak Spanish in Kansas. So like, what do you do with that, right? If that's your gift. She could speak Spanish. She could translate English to Spanish and Spanish to English. Well, she took herself down to the Farm Workers Bureau and volunteered to translate in their farm worker meetings. And the farm workers loved her because she had all the culture and custom of the Hispanic country. And the administrators loved her because she was beautiful and articulate and she was helpful to them and she was volunteering. And so she worked for them and they loved her so much that they all began to pay her. And they began to send her out statewide to these agricultural meetings where there were disputes with the farm workers. And Tanya came as this beautiful healing presence. The Hispanic workers trusted her. The administrators trusted her. She didn't have an agenda. She was just there to say, oh, I'll tell them what you mean. And here's what they mean. Oh, you mean that? Okay, I'll tell them what you mean, you see. And they started to pay her. And then, because she was involved in this Farm Workers Bureau, she started meeting and traveling through the state. She started meeting all of these people. Now, when she arrived in Kansas City to work with me, it was, I think, May. She was working for the summer, June, July, August. So all the time for application to college for the fall semester had long since closed, right? But Tanya, she meets the a woman who's head of Spanish studies at the university, who's also at the Farm Workers Bureau, and they become friends. Turns out this woman is head of the application committee for the university, and all of a sudden Tanya's in. She's in for this fall semester. Now, how to get there? Does she have a car? Because it was 13 miles away. She's not only in for the fall semester, she's granted a full 4-year scholarship because of the work that she's doing and because of her heart. She's giving her love and what her gift is, right? So then she gets a call out of the blue from her dad. Her dad had never been able to support her, and when Mom took her to Costa Rica, there was just no connection. And her dad really wanted to have a relationship with her and reconcile with her. So he drove down from Ohio to Kansas City and met with her, and it was a very wonderful and loving reconciliation. And when he drove down, he said, well, your paternal grandmother passed away, and I drove her car down. This is her car, and I'm going to give it to you to make up for all the ways that I haven't been able to provide for you. So now she has a car, she has a job, she has a 4-year scholarship. She ultimately was invited to live in Spain for a year, all expenses paid at the university there. And then she's sending me postcards from Paris and Barcelona and Rome, and everything worked out. Well, let's look at that for a minute. She poured herself into her dream. You know, she went down to the Farm Bureau and they found her services so valuable that they hired her and started to pay her. And she poured herself into that love for her new life. Using all 3 concepts, she got still and listened within herself. She created excitement, joy. She just was effervescent with joy. She used what she had, and she was willing to pour all she had into her success so that Spirit could pour and express through her. Can you see it? Works the same for all of us. Works the same for all of us. And it works in an accelerated way with joy and gratitude. Gratitude is the secret agent that exponentially accelerates all of your manifestations. She opened to align with God and to receive what God could pour through her. Did she speak affirmations? Yes, absolutely. But she didn't hang on to any belief that she came from nothing and had nothing, that she was the daughter of a single mother who eked out a living in Costa Rica renting cars, right? She didn't hang on to any of that, just like that same childhood experience for me didn't imprint on my consciousness thanks to unity principles. Same for Tanya. She grew up in unity. So she didn't believe that she had nothing, came from nothing, and thus had nothing to give. She just began giving of herself to the best of her ability in the most generous way that she could. So, Mr. Fillmore says it better than I can say it. And let's close with this. He says, realization precedes manifestation. That's one of the chapters in the book. You have to realize and internalize what you're becoming before it manifests, right? You've got to get it in your house, in your inner awareness, in your consciousness to manifest it. He said, God's man is hale, whole, and hearty. And certainly Tanya was hale, whole, and hearty. Don't you love the old language? It's like singing out of the hymnals. God's man is hale, whole, and hearty. This is truth. A spiritual realization is a realization of truth. A spiritual realization of health is the result of holding in consciousness a statement of health until the logic of the mind is satisfied and you receive the assurance that the fulfillment in the physical must follow. Now, have you been there in your prayer time where you just hold to the divine idea of life and something, all the tumblers click into place, and you know that you know. You don't know how you know. You don't know how it's going to happen. That's not your part. Your part is just to continue to pour that divine essence out of your consciousness. In other words, by realizing a healing prayer, man lays hold of the principle of health itself, and the whole consciousness is illumined. He perceives principle working out his health problems for him. However, when man lays hold of the principle of wholeness, he finds that he is automatically working with God, and that a much new power is added. He realizes my Father works even until now, and I work. And after man has applied his mind diligently for a season, he exhausts his resources or powers of realization for the time being and rests. You pour and you pour and you pour until you feel that those tumblers click into place, and then be still. His accumulated thought energy is completed or fulfilled in a higher realm, and he has a double assurance that health must become manifest. Jesus understood and demonstrated this law perfectly. He was so much at one with the principle of health that he needed only to say, "Thy faith has made thee whole," or "Lazarus, come forth." And you'll find this in your prayer work, that as you get into the flow of speaking in spiritual ideals and holding to them and seeing them manifest in your life, you gain an accelerated power. You're equipped with the power of spirit, as Mr. Fillmore says here. And then it becomes easier. You only need to speak the word one time and it's done for you as you believe, right? Because you're in that consciousness. You're vibrating at a higher consciousness. Realization means at one-ment, completion, perfection, wholeness, resting in God. A realization of health brings to the consciousness an inner being of that divine law, an inner knowing, Realization of health brings to consciousness an inner knowing that the divine law has been fulfilled in thought and act. Then, as man lays hold of the indwelling Christ, he is raised out of darkness into the Christ consciousness. And this, at one-ment with God, brings a lasting joy that cannot be taken away. Once you have it in consciousness, you have it forever. Once you've overcome something in consciousness, you never have to meet it again. It's just like once you finish first grade, you don't have to repeat all that you learned in first grade. It's with you forever. You're in second grade. Once you finish second grade, you're done. All right, so let's seal all of this in prayer for just a moment. Are you with me? I can breathe. Let's breathe. Take a moment. We covered a lot today, these three key concepts: prepare, prime, and pour. So let's take a moment. And let's pour living words of life right now into each of us, each of you. The book of Job says, "You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established for you, and light will shine upon your way." And so we decree right now that Jesus Christ is here right now, raising us to his level of consciousness, the consciousness of the Christ. That all-pervasive healing life. And in the name and through the power of this living Christ, mercy and favor shall follow you all the days of your life. Any struggles you may be feeling are right now converted to breakthroughs. Answers to your prayers are revealed in your heart, and they're satisfying and good. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, you have total health and well-being, because all the power of the divine life within you is more powerful than anything and totally sufficient to heal and restore you. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, that high ideal in consciousness, today you see an unveiling of God's divine plan for your life. You have a glorious future. Your destiny is decorated with favor and brilliance. And you shall see and do and become great things. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, unspeakable joy is your portion. We declare it now and we give thanks for it. And together we all say, amen. God bless you.